Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Australia once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel now a couple of times before. So I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last little while, a couple of different styles, and from what I gather, this brewery are best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, but they do have a fairly diverse range of different things that they do, which is always good to see. Now, the beer that we're going to have a look at today is one of their latest releases here in Hong Kong. They're imported in very small amounts here to Hong Kong, I should add, but it's one that is something of a special occasion beer for this brewery, so it is really cool that I was able to find this one up here. It's a style that I've tried from this brewery before, one that I know they can do very, very well, but it is a little bit stronger than the other beers I've had in this particular style family. So needless to say, I'm very, very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, like I said, we are going to head down to Australia. We're going to go to the state of Western Australia, the city of Perth, and I don't know if we can call it the district of Spearwood, but that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Innate Brewers. I believe this is their third appearance on the channel, if I'm not mistaken, but this particular beer is called the Birthday Hazy IPA, obviously brewed to celebrate their 10th birthday. It comes in at 10% ABV, and this one is a New England Hazy Imperial Triple, whatever you want to call it, IPA. Now, this is one that I picked up from Out of the Brew in Central or Shunwan. I forget exactly where the border is, but it's on Hong Kong Island here in the Hong Kong SAR, and they always get an interesting selection of things from Australia. As I say, they bring them in very, very small amounts, and I always keep an eye on what's in their fridge. But yeah, really cool to be able to get such a kind of special beer from this brewery. These guys are very, very small, but they are very highly regarded. I really need to get down to Perth actually and go and visit some of the breweries there, because Perth in Western Australia is of course where much of the Australian craft beer scene kind of kicked off. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we go. The Hazy Birthday IPA, or Birthday Hazy IPA, 10% ABV from Innate Brewers in Spearwood, Perth, Western Australia. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Innate Brewers before, and we will no doubt add more to that list at some point in the fairly near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Australian place along with a number of other things. That's being added to quite regularly because we do get a good selection of Australian craft beer here in Hong Kong, but do make sure you check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well. And if you're particularly interested in Australian beer, make sure you check out my friend Sam Smalley over at Short and Stout Beer Reviews. I'll try to remember to put the link to his channel in the video description below. But let's go on to my brewery notes then, so I can tell you a wee bit about Innate Brewers then. So, Innate Brewers, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in the Spearwood area of Perth over in Western Australia, and the company was founded back in 2015, and the main people behind it are Anthony Pillinger, Nathan Boyes, Kelly Lavin and Nigel Lutton. So Kelly had a background in business, Nigel and Nathan were in the IT and tech sector, while Anthony was previously in construction, and the four were apparently brought together by a love of home brewing, and they decided to take this passion and turn it into a business, and they developed a warehouse into a brewery in Spearwood. So to get the brewery off the ground, they enlisted the help of Joel Nash, who is from Fremantle, and he had been involved in the founding of Matso's up in Broome, and then he studied online with the Siebel Institute before working at Colonial Brewing Company in Margaret River in Western Australia, and he also worked with Gage Roads in Fremantle. Fremantle's where a lot of stuff kicked off actually in Perth, and then Indian Ocean Brewing in Mindarie, also in Western Australia. And after this, he joined Innate as their head brewer, and the four founders maintained their day jobs. So he was responsible for the kind of day-to-day running of things. But the brewery started off with a 1,000 litre brew kit that they called a Franken kit because of how it was kind of pieced together over the years of operation. But they've continued to build up the brewery infrastructure and develop new recipes over the last few years. But they've garnered a number of awards despite being a very small producer. They only produce in the region of about 50,000 litres of beer per year apparently, which I guess is why this brewery hasn't really exported further afield, because they certainly have the reputation to do that, I would say. But in 2019, they started canning their beers. Everything else, I believe, was just on draft before. And then in 2022, Matt Crockett joined the company as the new head brewer, having previously worked with Wayward in Sydney and also Little Creatures in Perth. But as of February 2025, these guys have produced about 130 different kinds of beer, according to Untappd. And like I said to you, they are known for their different kinds of hazy IPAs, but if you look through the list of stuff they've done, there's quite a diverse variety of styles in there. And like I say, I've been impressed with the beers that I've tried from these guys so far. So yeah, if you do happen across some of these beers, is that the right way to say it? My English is terrible these days. If you do happen to find some of these beers, then I would recommend you give them a go, but they are a little bit rare from what I understand. So we are very lucky to find these here in Hong Kong. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Innate Brewers for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a wee bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and have a wee look at the beer itself. So I'll let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. This one, incidentally, I think, is this a 375 milliliter can? I don't know if it actually says on the side here, but I'm guessing this, it looks like it's maybe 350 or 375. I'm really not quite sure. But yeah, Innate sell their beers in the smaller cans, and I'm guessing that's because their batch is a little bit smaller. But yeah, you can see plain black can, this one. The artwork on this one is really nice. It tells you on the side here their 10th anniversary collection, so they've obviously produced a few beers for this 10th anniversary collection. Oh, I was right, 375 millilitres. I knew I saw it somewhere. But it says, we're celebrating 10 years of brewing the only way we know how, making a big old hoppy boozy banger. This is our big birthday hazy IPA. Thanks for supporting us the last 10 years. Here's to another 10. So yeah, as I said earlier, a 10% New England hazy imperial triple, whatever you want to call it, IPA. The hops in this one are Talus, Citra and Luminosa. All three of them are American. Talus we know quite well. That's 14 or 16% alpha acid, I forget. It's a daughter of Sabro, so it has that kind of coconutty character to it, but quite a bit of pink grapefruit from what I remember. Citra we know very, very well, 14% alpha acid. Peach, lots and lots of juicy mango, and in a hazy IPA it's going to show its more lemon-limey side. Luminosa is one I think I've only come across once or twice, so that's an American hop, fairly new, can be sort of 10 to 12% alpha acid, and it gives you a lot of tropical fruit. The little website I had a wee look at before is saying that we're supposed to get peach, apricot, guava, and quite a little bit of lemon and orange in this one, so it should be really interesting. I think I've only ever come across this hop once before, maybe twice at the most. So yeah, really nice, interesting mix of hops in this one. I think we should get this out and have a wee look at it, so let's do that. And happy anniversary, of course, to Innate Brewers. Really curious about this. Like I said, very, very lucky to get a hold of this beer. I'm sure Sam actually told me that even over in Victoria, he struggles to get anything from these guys. Oh, my fridge is a little bit. My fridge is obviously a little bit too cold. I bought this one quite recently as well. Oh, but it says it's packaged on the 16th of August 2024. So yeah, this beer is actually a little bit older. The last ones I had were actually really quite fresh. I only bought this beer, if I remember correctly, at the end of December, or just before I went away on my Christmas holidays, in fact. So yeah, drinking this one about 6 months old, so we'll just need to see how it turns out. But yeah, anyway, we've got the whole beer out into the glass. It's poured with about a 3/4 finger of a kind of creamy coloured head, I would say, and it's quite a soapy head, in all honesty. So yeah, you've got kind of smaller bubbles on the surface of the liquid there, but little, some bumpier ones going further up from that. And you can see this is actually one of the more orangey hazy IPAs that I've come across quite recently. So yeah, remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar is caramelised, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour as well, but you don't often have to care about that when it comes to the different kinds of IPAs. Level of haze in this one is pretty decent as well. It's a bit hard to say whether it's really that soupy and gloopy, because you do get a little bit less opacity around the edge of the glass there. But yeah, it looks pretty nice. Remember, in hazy IPAs, the level of haze is due to the oak content, wheat content, and to a degree what yeast you use. Not much in the way of visible carbonation with this one, in honesty, and you can see the head has faded away to be a kind of thinner foamy layer on the top, but you do have a little bit of a bubbly ring around the edge of the glass. And I'll just let you have a wee look. You can see there are wee bits of sediment in this one as well, but it is of course all natural, so not really bothered about that. In all honesty, I think it actually adds a wee bit more flavour to the beer sometimes, I have to say. So yeah, I don't know if we really need to say much else about the appearance of this one. I think we should go on and just have a wee look at the aroma then. So let's do that. Ooh, very soft aroma actually. And it's got a nice balance on the fruity side of things. I'm going to say it's really, it's got a really nice balance in there with the fruity side of things. Lots of tropical fruit, which has a bit of pungency to it, but you also get that kind of softer, more citrusy side to it as well. I will say it's a very soft and kind of mild aroma that I'm getting out of this. Let's just sugar it up and see what. Well, if you sugar it up, you get a bit more of the peach and the guava and things like that, which is obviously going to be luminosa and citra, and I guess, you know, talus is going to contribute to that as well, because it's got that pink grapefruity note. So yeah, if you sugar it up, you get a wee bit more note out of it, but the green component really takes a back seat in this one for me. But we have to remember, this beer is about 6 months old at the time of drinking. So maybe that's playing a role there. It could be cryo, of course, that's involved in here, which would contribute to that a little bit. But yeah, the maltiness is nice too. It smells a little bit sweeter, which was kind of, if you know the colours of beer, you would think that was going to be the case by looking at this one. But yeah, you've got a good little bit of breadiness and stuff in there. I think this is going to be quite an interesting one to taste actually, but let's just break down the aroma before we have a taste of this then. So for me, backbone of this beer, it's got a little bit of like a fresh wholemeal brown bready bread crust forming the backbone of this one. Of course, you get those little elements of like wood and cracker that you very often get with these beers. If I take the aroma in a bit more deeply, it's got like quite a sweet, wholemeal brown bready note to it. There's definitely some white bread in there as well, and there's more of a wheaty white bready character to this one as well. As I've said, wheat can behave differently depending on where it's from. You know, North American wheat tends to be quite smooth in a way, European wheat tends to be a bit more bitey, and I've been finding, since I've had access to Australian beers a bit more, the Australian wheat has like a little bit of bitiness, but it's more close to the North American wheat actually. So you can smell that nice bit of smoothness there, but just a little bit in the back of the nose up here, you've almost just got that little bit of bite to it. So the wheat's definitely present in there. And you can smell a bit of the oatiness too. Now, as I've often said, the oatiness in New England IPAs can be a good rough indicator of how fresh your beer is. Basically, the fresher the beer is, the creamier the oats will be, the drier they are, the older the beer is going to be. And you can smell a bit of that dryness coming out of this one now, because the beer is 6 months old. But again, oats behave differently depending on where they're from. European oats are very creamy, American oats are a bit more porridgey, and Australian oats I'm still trying to figure out a wee bit, to be honest with you. All of that kind of stuff that I've just mentioned is due to different soil profiles, water profiles and so on. I studied chemistry originally, so I'm a bit of an ingredients nerd and process nerd when it comes to beers, which is kind of how I've picked up these things, or how I've been interested enough to pick up these things over the years. But yeah, on top of the wee bit of oaty character that you're getting out of this one, there is an element of sweetness there. So there's like Werther's Original Butter Candy Butterscotch, a little bit of like a caramelly or fudgy sort of thing going on as well, and definitely little elements of, you know, McVitie's Digestive Biscuit and things as well. So yeah, the way that goes together, I think, is is very, very nice in this one. So yeah, I like that about this beer. Yeah, so for me, the yeasty side of this one, I think is quite, the yeasty side of this one is quite interesting. It's more, the yeast is at the back of the nose is quite white bready leaning. There's a wee touch of brown bready character to it and a wee bit of bread crust, but mostly it's white bready leaning. But yeah, the hoppy side of this one I think is pretty interesting because the green component really is, it's almost, it really takes a back seat in this one. There's a nice little bit of grassiness in there, that's for sure. So yeah, I really like how the grassy side of things goes together in this one. But yeah, that is, for me, the grassy side of this one is interesting because it's just so soft. And again, it could be cryo, of course. Cryo oil smoothens out your green component, but it did say that luminosa doesn't really give you much of a green component. It's very like soft fruit, so there's an interesting point. But when it comes to IPAs, you have three types of hopping. Early addition hopping, which takes place within the first hour of the wort boil, that gives you mainly bitterness and a deep dank kind of green component. You've got late addition hopping, which usually takes place within the last half hour of the wort boil, a wee bit of bitterness, mainly flavour aroma, and it gives you a very bright green component. Dry hopping takes place after the wort boil is complete, and yeah, that is all about flavour and aroma. And again, it gives you a very bright green component. So West Coast IPAs tend to use all three types of hopping, which is why they're deeper, danker and more oily. New England IPAs tend to use late addition and dry hopping for the most part, which is why they're softer and more juicy. This one, I'm pretty sure, from the aroma, is relying on late addition and dry hopping. But yeah, there's a wee touch, very slight earthiness to it. Not a lot of floral character, mainly it's kind of grassy, potentially a little touch woody as well. I think that's a fair way to describe the green component in this one. But let's focus on the fruity side of things, just to round off before we taste this one. But I will say, with this beer, I'm pretty sure there's a bit of caramel or something in this. So yeah, for me, the more you smell this one, the sweeter it gets, actually. But yeah, the fruity side of things, I do get a little bit of that pink grapefruit from the talus. You can smell that little bit of pungency in there. You've got the peach and the guava, which is going to be from both Luminosa and Citra, of course. I'm not getting so much in the way of mango out of this, but I'm getting quite a bit of like apricot and maybe papaya and stuff like that, to be honest with you. There's definitely some of that in there, but at the front of the nose, you can smell a wee bit of that more pungent, lemony, limey character, which is going to be Citra and Luminosa together, I think. And there's a distinctive orange to this one as well. I think the exact descriptor on the hops website I was looking at to learn about Luminosa, it said like candied orange peel, and I can see why they would say that, because it's like an almost, can you say sherbet orange? It's almost like that, like a kind of powdery sort of orangey character that comes out of it. So yeah, that's quite interesting. But the citrusy side of this beer, I think, gets more prominent in the aroma the more that you smell of this one. So yeah, I think this is a really interesting beer. So as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of your beer before you get stuck into it. But yeah, I think we've said everything we need to about the aroma of this beer, and I'm just very curious to try it. So yeah, this one is the Birthday Hazy IPA, a 10% New England Triple IPA, the 10th anniversary beer of Innate Brewers in Spearwood in Perth, down in Western Australia. So yeah, really cool to try this one, even though it's a little bit older actually. So yeah, let's do this. Slàinte, skål, and cheers. Yeah, that's really pretty damn good actually. Quite different to the hazy IPAs I've had recently. And I will say as well, if you're to taste this one, it doesn't feel as if it's too old actually. It comes across as very smooth, because what can happen to these beers with the New Englands is they can get oxidized and they can turn a more sort of orangey colour. But this one, yeah, definitely hasn't done that as far as I can tell. It is in pretty damn good condition, and it's interesting. I think it's always interesting to try beers from a good IPA brewery after a few months to see how they hold up, because it shows you how good the product is in the end. I will say that with the malt base you do get a bit of that drier oaty character that I was talking about. So I'll be very clear with this one. We're not talking about this beer in its prime, if you like, but even at this age, if we can call it that, at 6 months old, it's in good condition, so it gets a thumbs up from me. But it's definitely more of a kind of sweeter, malty leaning New England IPA. As I've said many a time, when it comes to hazy IPAs, New England IPAs, whatever you want to call them, there's kind of 6 elements to think about these when it comes to the malty and yeasty side of things. So you've got your kind of farmhousey yeasty character and your rye leaning grainy side of things. Those are a bit more common in American or New England brewed New England IPAs, because the style really started as the farmhouse IPA, but as the style has evolved and moved away from there, it's more about wheaty bitiness, oaty creaminess, barley malt bread, and also the sweeter side of things. Quite obviously, this one is leaning toward the sweeter side of things, but there's quite a bit of oatiness in there and a good bit of wheat and barley malt as well. So yeah, but the sweeter side of things I think is what makes this one stand out in my mind, at least. But yeah, it's a nice beer, this one. Soft, juicy, slightly more on the oily side of the New England IPA spectrum too. But yeah, let's break this down then and describe the flavour for you a bit more in depth. We'll go to the middle third of the palate as we always do. So middle third of your palate then, the backbone of the beer is like a kind of fresh, wholemeal, brown bready bread crust. As you move further forward there, you start to get that little bit of woody character that you very often get, and you can feel above the bread crust there's just a little bit of a drier sort of cracker. So yeah, I like that about this one for sure. So yeah, the bready character above this one is quite I'd say is quite interesting, because you've got this layer of like sweet wholemeal brown bread in there, and then above that you've got a layer of quite dense white bready character, which is from the barley malt. You can kind of tell the difference there for sure. So you've got 2 quite sweet layers of breadiness in there. And it feels quite familiar, to be honest with you, but at the same time there's a few subtle differences to it. Is it maybe like crystal that they're using in this one? I don't know. It could be one of the Australian malt producers that I'm not overly familiar with, because there's some familiarity with the flavours of the malty character with this beer, because you notice little subtleties, like, you know, European malt tends to be a bit drier than North American malt, generally speaking, and of course the Australians produce a lot of stuff themselves. So yeah, it's interesting but this is quite a heavy and quite dense beer. We do need to remember that as well. So yeah, quite dense brown and sweet brown bready character in there, quite a sweet and dense white bready character in there too. And above that you can feel like the really dense and slightly drier wheaty white bread coming out of this one. Of course the wheaty white bread is just that little bit more bitey further back on the palate, and then yeah, above that you've got some really nice oaty creamy notes coming out of the beer. Yeah, so the oaty creamy side of this beer, it still has a little bit of that creaminess to it. Like if you go down the middle line of your tongue, above the wheaty white bread layer, you can feel that oaty creaminess there, but it does show you the drier side of the oats as you go out further out toward the sides of your palate there. And in the dead centre of your palate, you can feel that little oily kind of circle there, which is the boozy part of the beer, of course. So around the very, like in the centre of that, I would say there is a bit of an almost straight up sweet caramel, but it's almost a little bit like fudgy around the edge, and then there's a wee bit of biscuit, and all of that sits on top of the oaty layer, actually. So yeah, the way everything kind of pieces together in this one, I think, is really nice. The middle third of the palate on this one is a little bit drier, but quite dense and just quite nice, to be honest with you. I like that. I've not had a sweeter New England triple or New England double either in quite some time. This reminds me of what was it? The series that Steepberries did, the triple IPAs, the Chronic and things like that. They always named them after diseases and things. I remember the black cans with the different colours. This one kind of reminds me of those Steepberries beers I was reviewing a year or two ago. But yeah, good stuff once again. I think that's everything but the middle third of the palate. Let's go to the back third of the palate. I've often said sweeter flavours come out further forward, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back, and the back third of your palate is going to show you similar flavours to the middle third, just at different intensities. So yeah, the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get that nice little bit of bready build up in there. You can feel the brown bread at the bottom, the white bread on top, then the more dense wheaty white bread at the very top there. The backbone of that back third of your palate is a slightly drier wholemeal brown bready bread, because you've got the cracker in there. The brown bready layer is a little bit lighter, taller and more airy and a wee bit drier too. The white bready layer sits above that, and that is also a little bit lighter, taller, drier and more airy. Then you can feel the wheaty white bread just sitting on top of that as well, and the wheaty bread actually shows you a wee bit more kind of bitiness and things like that. Maybe there's a little touch of the drier side of the oats just creeping over the top of that too. But then yeah, on the back third of your palate, the thing at the top is of course the yeasty character of the beer. So yeah, for me, the yeasty character of this beer, it's quite the yeasty character for me, this one, it's got a bit more like a kind of brown bready character in the middle, then around the edge it's more of a kind of dense white bready note, and then yeah, the very edge of it's more like a kind of white bread crusty, crackery sort of thing. So yeah, definitely, back third of your palate you can feel the flavour is taller, then as you move further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, the way that this one goes together, I think, is really, really nice. So gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah. So yeah, that is really nice. How that goes together. The malty yeasty side of this one is quite different to what I've had recently. So let's focus on the hoppy side of things then. So we talked about hopping earlier on. You do get a little touch of bitterness out of this one into the aftertaste, but not a lot, to be honest with you. There's a wee bit of earthiness in there in the back corners of the palate. As you move further forward, there's a little touch of woody, herbally sort of note, and maybe a tiny, tiny little hint of kind of piney character. But as you reach the front corners of the palate, it's a little bit more floral and aromatic, but round the front curve of the tongue, the beer is definitely lighter and more grassy in a sense, actually. So yeah, it's got a wee bit of it's quite smooth. I mean, I would think there's maybe a little bit of cryo in this one, but again, this beer is 6 months old, so the hoppy character will be starting to drop out of it, which would explain a little bit the kind of the slightly woody and herbally vegetal kind of thing that I'm getting further back on the palate, as well as a wee bit of the dryness too. So yeah, that's something to think about in this beer also. But yeah, let's go to the front third of your palate then and focus on the fruity side of things. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get that nice little bit of bready build up in there. There's the brown bread in the base, the white bread in the middle again, and then the kind of wheaty notes on top. But the base of that front third of your palate, you've got the white bready bread crust, or the more brown bready bread crust in there, the cracker, brown bread, white bread, wheaty side of things, and the smoother side of the oats kind of coming forward. And then above that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy, fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, the way that that goes together, I think, is really, really nice once again. So yeah, big thumbs up to big thumbs up to Innate for the malt base in here. This does go together nicely. But yeah, the oily bubble where the fruity juicy esters roll the way out of the beer, it's actually very, very smooth, but into the aftertaste it shows you a little bit more pungency. So yeah, at the back of that oily bubble you can definitely get that sort of pinky, grapefruity sort of thing from the talus. There's peach in there, there's guava as well. So if you move a little bit further forward from the pink grapefruit, you've got layers of stuff in here. So on the top you've got a bit of peachy sharpness, you've got a little bit of guava. I think guava is kind of a fairly substantial layer of this one, because There's a little bit of mango underneath, but I've always found the flavour of guava to be like a very green mango. I've always described it like that. There's a wee touch of like passion fruit underneath, and as you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, you're getting little bits of like apricot and stuff like that. There's maybe a little bit of pineapple in there as well, but mixed in with that, you get that kind of coconutty thing that's a kind of it's a trademark, if you like, of Talus. That's definitely coming out in this beer. But then when you go into the front half of the front third of your tongue, the beer's distinctly more kind of citrusy, almost. That's for sure. So yeah, the front half of that front third of your palate in there, I'd say, yeah, I can see when they were talking about Luminosa, they said, yeah, candied orange peel, like it is like a slightly candied, drier orange, if you like. There is a little bit of the pineapple kind of creeps forward a wee bit on top of that, and there is also, just behind the very front tip of the tongue, there's a wee bit of a slightly more limey note to this one. It reminds me a wee bit of Motueka from New Zealand. It's a little bit like that. But yeah, the front half of that front third of your palate is quite distinctively orangey, I would say. And I was expecting a bit more lemon out of it from the aroma, in all honesty. But yeah, fruity side of this one is pretty nice. And the kind of pungency of the guava and the peach and the pink grapefruit in this one, that does linger into the aftertaste a wee bit, along with the kind of sweetness of the malt base. So this is a really interesting one. This is quite different to what I've had in recent times, but after 4,000 odd beer reviews, you want things that are going to make you think a little bit. So yeah, my kudos to Innate Brewers for making me think a little bit about this one. But it's a very good beer. Definitely with the New England IPAs, it's on the sweeter and more dense side of things. It almost reminds me actually of some of these beers that are termed more American IPAs. So it's more like the American IPAs, the more generic ones, they're kind of somewhere between West Coast and New England. This one kind of sits really in the middle of the two styles because of the sweetness, because of the brown sugary sweetness it has. It's got a bit of West Coast character, but because of the kind of big breadiness and smoothness it has, it's got the New England character as well. So I would be tempted more to call this one like an American, one of these more generic American style IPAs, rather than being hazy or New England, even though I referred to it like that earlier on in the video. But yeah, I think that's a fair summary of this one. Just to round off then with a wee look at the mouthfeel. For me, this beer is bottom end of full bodied, carbonation's very, very smooth. It does have a degree of like oily slickness to it, and there's a slight degree of sweetness there, but the bready side of things or the malty side of things, sorry, has a bit of dryness underneath. But yeah. So yeah, the malty side of this one has, yeah, it's a bit drier underneath, smoother in the middle, and it's got a dry sweetness on top. I think that's a good way to describe it. The IBU in this beer, I think this is like 20 or 25 or something like that. Bit hard to tell, obviously, because this beer is not in its prime, as I mentioned earlier on. It would maybe be about 30 or 40 before, but it does give you a wee touch of bitterness there. And then yeah, we've got a lovely kind of juicy, fruity note coming out of this one. So yeah, the way that everything goes together in this beer, I think, is very, very nice, and yeah, it gets a big thumbs up from me. So yeah, a really interesting New England Triple I, or Hazy Triple IPA, I should call it, this one. And yeah, definitely cool to return to Innate Brewers. I always enjoy reviewing my Aussie beers here on the channel. So I think we can leave it at that for this one. This one was the birthday Hazy IPA 10th anniversary edition, because no doubt they'll have more later on in their history, I'm sure. But yeah, this one comes to you from Innate Brewers in Spearwood in Perth in Western Australia. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Innate Brewers as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the very near future. Until the next time, Slange at Skull, cheers, check out my social media, check out Innate's social media, and I'll see you guys on another review very, very soon. Ciao just now.